colossal works, the biggest things humanity has ever tried to build. In the desert of northwest Saudi Arabia, there is a construction site about 2.5 kilometers long. It was supposed to be a city stretching 170 kilometers straight across the country. 2 mirrored walls, each half a kilometer tall, holding 9 million people. What is actually there today is a strip of foundations in the sand. This is the story of the widest gap between a render and reality the world has ever seen. It is called the Line. And when it was unveiled, it was not pitched as a building. It was pitched as the future of how humans live. No cars, no streets, no carbon. A single structure, running in a perfectly straight line to the horizon. That was the promise. What happened next is a lesson in what money cannot buy. In 2021, Saudi Arabia announced the Line as the centerpiece of a plan called Vision 2030. The idea was to spend the country's oil wealth building something that would outlast oil itself. And the design revealed in 2022 was genuinely unlike anything ever proposed. Picture 2 buildings, side by side, each one 500 meters tall, taller than almost every skyscraper on Earth. Each one running not for a block, but for 170 kilometers across the desert. The outside would be a wall of mirrored glass, reflecting the sky. Inside, between the 2 walls, an entire city. And the promises inside were just as bold. 9 million people, 0 cars, because you would never need one. Everything you required, within a 5-minute walk. And if you did need to cross the whole city, a high-speed rail line would carry you end-to-end in 20 minutes. All of it powered by the sun and the wind. A perfect, sealed, vertical world. The renders were stunning, and they went everywhere. Glowing walls at sunset, gardens hanging in the air, marinas built into the base of a skyscraper. For a while, the Line felt less like a construction project and more like a piece of science fiction that someone had actually decided to fund. The estimates for that funding ranged from a few $100 billion to, by some analyses, more than $1 trillion. And then the reporting started to change. In April of 2024, Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal reported something that punctured the whole vision. The first phase of the Line, they said, was being quietly cut, not trimmed, cut from 170 kilometers down to about 2.5. The population target told the same story. The plan to have 1.5 million people living there by 2030 was reportedly slashed to fewer than 300,000. Officially, Saudi Arabia pushed back. In public statements, it said all of its megaprojects would go ahead as planned. But the reported numbers and the cranes told a different story. The Line was colliding with something the renders never showed. The cost. The replenishment of these, this first 300 vision, but the first was pure 25s of 2025 oriented on a leaked internal audit of the project. According to that audit, finishing the Line as originally designed would cost around $8.8 trillion. It is worth sitting with that number. $8.8 trillion is more than double the entire annual budget of the United States government. The same leaked audit reportedly concluded the full city would not be finished until around 2080. The vision was not just expensive. On paper, it was a project that no single nation could actually afford to complete. The best complaint really form-empowered being theoretical in Brown and inverse to 2025 was the future to the project be found about agent found the Line water is ineligible to the way to spend in the 2025 and wanting parents the mo revisited 20%. The project began to shrink the most visible way possible. Across Kranzi 2020s and E5, 20 NEOM, the wider zone the Line sits inside, fell by around 70%. And in 2026, more than 1,000 staff were moved off the site itself and back to the capital, Riyadh, for what was described as centralized oversight. The desert was getting quieter, not busier. Then came the decision that made it official. In September of 2025, the Public Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund driving the whole thing, suspended construction on the Line. Suspended. The single most ambitious building project ever announced put on hold, with its foundations barely out of the sand. And there is a harder part of this story, one the renders never included. The land the Line was meant to cross was not empty. For centuries, it had been home to the Huitat tribe, some 20,000 people. Beginning in 2020, they were ordered to leave to make way for the project. According to human rights organizations, including the group ALQST and later United Nations experts, the evictions were forced. One man, Abdul Rahim al-Kuwaiti, publicly refused to go and filmed his refusal. In April 2020, those same organizations report he was killed by security forces at his home. Others who resisted were arrested. Several received long prison terms, and rights groups reported that 3 men were sentenced to death. The city those families were moved for is the one now sitting suspended in the sand. So what is the line, really, in 2026? It is important to be precise because it has not officially been canceled. On the ground, what exists is roughly 2.5 kilometres valve, foundations, and earthworks, out of 170 kilometres. That is about 1.5% of the promised length, and not a single one of those 500-meter mirrored walls has risen above the desert floor. The official position is that the line is paused and rephased, not dead. And around it, some real infrastructure has been built. Power and water systems. A separate industrial zone, a small luxury island resort that has actually opened. The wider project has produced tangible things. But the flagship, the vision that was sold to the world, the mirrored city for $9 million, now has a full completion date quietly pushed to 2045 at the earliest. Some independent analysts think the true figure, if it is ever finished at all, is closer to the 2070s or 80s. The line was meant to prove that with enough ambition and enough money, you could redesign the city itself from a blank sheet of desert. Instead, it may have proven the opposite, that some limits are not about vision or willpower. They are about physics and arithmetic, and the people who were already standing on the land. A render can promise anything. The desert only keeps what you can actually build. So the question the line leaves behind is not whether it was too ambitious. It is what it costs, in money and in lives, to find out that something was impossible all along. If this blew your mind, hit that like button and subscribe for more megastructures, and tell me in the comments which one I should cover next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.